It's a people, it's a community, it's a life, it's a heart, it's a spirit.
Question, the heck would you want a picture of a tattoo of $1,000 on your penis for?
What makes this book so relevant, even though it was written over 100 years ago, is that it's about terrorism.
The work, sex, cars, bars, roads.
And the children is building on what they have. They have great imagination.
Dementia is not a diagnosis. It's a set of symptoms.
And he kept explaining to me that I wasn't gay. You cannot be gay. You just cannot.
The main thing is to be open and honest and be, true to yourself.
Hi, and welcome to Talking About. Tonight we are talking about readings by my guest, Jackie Sheeler, who is a returning guest. Thank you for joining us once again. It's good to have you back.
I'm delighted.
Okay, we sort of ran out of time last time, and we were talking about your website, poets.com.
Yes.
Okay. What is the website all about?
Well, it's actually a publication venue for poets, some nationally known and some new writers, as well as a collection of activist links, a lot of anti-war stuff this last year or so. And it's a gathering of poetry calendars. If you go to poets.com, that's poets with a Z.
poetz.com.
Right. You can find, we have the poetry calendar for New York City with hundreds of readings for every week. You just click on it. You can find a venue for any day of the week. You can go forward and backward in time. We also have the calendar for New Jersey. We have a Texas calendar. We have the Hudson Valley area in New York, and we have a few more cities coming on board this summer.
So through our entire viewing area and beyond.
Yes, absolutely. We have some musical venues, but primarily it's poetry readings. You can find out who's the feature. You can find an open mic if you'd like to read your own work. It's fabulous.
So the website highlights more than just your own work.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a very minor part of that. I have my own outlets for my work, but I really... Poets have been so generous with me, and life has been so generous with me in my creative work that I try to share that with others. And one of the ways I do that is through curatingpoets.com.
Okay, and as we were talking about on our last show, we were talking about the current book that you had edited, which was Off the Cuffs.
Right.
And that was largely influenced by your life and experience, and the gathering of...
With police, right.
Poetry
by and about the police.
Exactly. And let's backtrack a little bit to your first book, which is called The Memory Factory.
That's correct. That was published by Buttonwood Press. It came out in the fall of 2002.
Okay. And
I actually won a first book contest. Delighted. Poets and Writers, which is the magazine for writers. In the back they have classifieds, and it's places where you can publish, calls for manuscripts, chapbooks. And contests. And once I had my manuscript put together, and there were poems there that were written very recently, and there were poems there that had been written 10 years ago, I put together the manuscript and sent it out to 13 of those contests, and Buttonwood Press contacted me almost immediately when they received my manuscript and awarded me the Magellan Prize, part of which was publication of the book, and I was so delighted.
It's good to be appreciated.
Yes, yes. The timing was kind of interesting because I was notified in July of 2001, and the book was supposed to come out about the end of the year or the beginning of the following year, and I was already in process working on Off the Cuffs as well. In fact, I had broken my ankle. I was home for 6 weeks with nothing to do but write. What a luxury. And I finished both manuscripts and was shopping both of them. And when September 11th came, which was shortly after my first book had been accepted, I stopped trying to promote Off the Cuffs for a while, trying to find a publisher for it, because the climate had changed so much. No one was interested in talking about a book that might even vaguely criticize the police. So I set that.
Heaven forbid.
But I knew that the pendulum would swing, unfortunately, back. I would prefer for us all to be heroes at all times, but I didn't think that it would.
Right. Well, I mean, in Off
that way.
the Cuffs, you do cover a lot of the shades of gray.
Right.
As well, which is a rarity to see. It's usually spotlighting one extreme or the other, which we had mentioned in the previous program.
Yeah. But what it did give me the opportunity to do was to focus on my book and to promote the book and do a lot of readings from it. I host a weekly reading in Manhattan at the Cornelia Street Cafe every Friday night, and I did some readings there for the book, and the poets who come every week were very supportive, and I've done some traveling and some readings for it, and it's really been a fabulous experience your first publication, in terms of the first time you get a poem accepted, is something you'll never forget. And very similarly, the first book, it was a dream come true that I suspected it might always remain a dream. I wasn't convinced that I'd quite get there, and
Welcome to reality.
publisher is wonderful. Buttonwood is a wonderful press. My editor, David Radovich, has been the most inspiring and supportive editor that a person could have. And I'm delighted because I've heard some stories of other first books or even second books. It isn't always that way, and I'm so happy that for me it was a 100% positive experience.
Is that just finding the proper give and take between the creative?
I guess so. Maybe it's just chemistry or karma. I don't know. I'm just grateful for it.
Okay. Is the Memory Factory largely biographical, autobiographical?
Most of my poems are narrative, personal. We used to call them confessional poems, but that term is no longer in favor. It's not politically correct to call them that, so I won't, even though I just did. Although some of them are persona poems. I have a poem written in the voice of the co-pilot of Egypt Air Flight 800, for example. Although reading that, you'll know it's not my personal history,
right?
Because I haven't taken any planes down, or that would have been known, when you got the book. So, but the ones that aren't, there's a poem there written in the voice of John Benet Ramsey, which also is obvious. But the ones that are not out of my personal history, it's clear that they aren't. And the ones that seem like personal narrative are.
Do the ones that aren't, does that come from a sense of empathy?
No. With the John Benet poem, was more an outrage, kind of that. I don't know what's more outrageous, that the little girl died or how she was used when she was living. I'm not. They're equal crimes, kind of, in my view. That whole doll her up and stick her out on the runway and make her be the little image from the magazine. It's just an obscene way that women are objectified in this culture and continue to be. Even though we and most men know better, somehow the machine rolls on. And to see children sucked into it, little girls at such a young age, with their parents, the primary accomplice.
Which brings it back to the activist portion of your personality.
Yes, absolutely. Although I'm equally fierce about environmental issues, I'm very pro-peace. I don't think war is ever justified, ever. And then people always respond, well, what about World War II? Well, obviously, if World War II was such a good idea, we wouldn't still be having wars now. So clearly war isn't the answer because it hasn't stopped war. But whatever. We can go on about that for a whole other show.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and you have passionate extremes on both ends, and it's just, it's been a rough time.
A tough year for that.
Yes. But focusing on the book, we're going to turn the rest of the show over to you.
Thank you so much.
And I just really appreciate you coming. I will not be back for the rest of the show, and I want to encourage you to stick around. And Jackie is going to read for us from both books, or just from the Memory Factory?
I'll just stick with the Memory Factory.
Okay, from her book, The Memory Factory. And I thank you for doing this. I thank you for coming back.
Thank you for having me.
And we're gonna blink to black, and when we come back, Jackie will be reading for us. Thank you.
The first poem is called One Uncivilized Soul. Before my husband stepped out of the present tense, we lived in a building that had been left for dead. Walked a wide wooden plank through the window every day to breathe its rank perfume of rotten plasterboard and basement dust that rose around our feet. All night long we'd be calling in the courtyards, "Tato bien," street code for safety, or "Bajando," code for cops and war, while the building made music out of the dripping of invisible water and whisper of falling wallpaper peelings, out of the crunch of crumbs and crack vials between sneaker and linoleum, indelibly patterned in grime. Squatting there, we learned the worth of cinder blocks and milk crates, dangled water buckets from vertical clotheslines, buried our shit in the farthest corners like dogs, and made sexless, junky love in the glow of 10-cent bodega candles, looking almost normal in that cheap light. In July, when police quarantined the building, doors and windows sealed in steel, mattresses and cardboard walls hauled out, carted off, the husband left without a forwarding address. For a month I puzzled through the streets, unable to conjure him out of the sidewalk, sleeping most nights under a broken ghetto sky with splintered benches drilling pinholes in my jeans, homesick for him and the shattered Driggs Avenue rooms, such startling loves in the heart of an addict at the edge of getting free. 13 roofed years have folded past me now, my mailbox taken for granted, my blood circling through unbruised veins, clean and strong as hydrant water through a hose. But back there, in that building, in my mind, invisible water still drips. Basement dust rises. Buckets lift to windowsills. And my uncivilized soul is at home. This next poem is called Girl is the Line on the Floor. Girl is the place where you go to be judged, the place to be found wanting. Too much of this, too little of that, a turnip nose, substandard A-cup tits, the line on the floor where I had to stand. You stand there! Ridiculous in a royal blue, puffy-thighed, elastic-waisted gym suit. Even the beautiful girls looked ugly, the ones with acceptable shapes and faces. It takes 3 decades to erase the traces of Scarlett O'Hara's 18-inch waist out of my mouth like vestiges of hangover vomit. Girl is the line on the floor, the starting point of inevitable wrong, where no one is allowed to quit the contest. I never wanted a dick of my own or a tool belt. I wanted only to be made invisible every now and then, to sling down 86th Street in a pair of dungarees, utterly unnoticed and free. And the next poem is dedicated to Mindy Slater, and it's called To Xerox 3 Stapled Sheets is Simple. Separate and lay the pages flat, shut the lid, press a switch. But who am I to rip that staple out? 12 years have passed since she died, and maybe these pages are the last of all the pages stapled by my friend in her truncated life. 3 old poems on onion skin that rolled off in Olivetti in the 70s. To leave them uncopied is to soon lose them altogether. To take them apart is to yank the silver keystone from a mortarless wall, the small metal stitch that pins her soul to the world. Prying open stapled jaw, I feel the hushed breath of her rush past, see a riot of lilacs nodding on her dresser in our rented Brooklyn rooms. I smell the brown hair at her neck, and I dip down deep into the quivering sweat of memory. Allow her to inhabit the air beside me as the unclenched staple drops. This is a newer poem. It's not in the book. Hopefully it'll be in the next one. It's entitled God Enters the World. God is shooting up again, disguised in heartbreak and denim. He sits on a windowsill, one sleeve rolled, arm stiff as a plank, zeroed in, on tiny navigations. He's forgotten his name. God goes tricking in Midtown, stoops at car windows, sachets down side streets, rolls $10 bills into the lining of her shoplifted purse. God's into costumes and amnesia, slips entirely inside each fresh uniform, leaves the heft of godhood out of all earthly reach. God makes commercials and blows herself to pieces in Jerusalem, designs swimming pools and peddles Viagra over the web. God enters the world godless, unholy, powerless, blank, relinquishes memory and might to become consumed with the concerns of humanness. But this you already know: how to live, nameless in the limits of a body, unable to recall what came before, unable to agree on what comes after. This poem is entitled, Dream Me Coupled. Think of me when you think of me as the wise-cracking weaver in the back of every room who wove a sling of jokes to hold your tears on the morning you were bereft. Think of me as a book you might not read, an unframed poster long unhung, the one broken button on your stereo remote. Never think of me, though, as unloved. That's my job, and I do it well. Wandering unpeopled rooms to name the missing, the unmet, the dead. So every now and then, think me paired, matched, partnered. Conjure one shape to place beside me in your sleep, and dream me coupled, the permanent half of something much, much larger. Not a third, not a quarter, not an all-enduring, unremarkable whole. So think of me when you think of me, if ever you should think of me at all, as anchored, rooted, cherished, not a wet-eyed smiler on the stony brink, but a blank screen during intermission, before the personality of light. It's a poem entitled Belief System. I believe in poetry. I believe in poet after poet stepping up to the mic tonight to recite. They're all laying their balls on the line, and I believe that laying your balls on the line is a wonderful thing to do, a thing to get used to. I believe that poetry changes people, and people change the world, and I believe that you believe the world does need to change. I believe in the poetry of hip-hop and the power of angry love, and I believe that the Thunderbirds sucking drunks of the Bowery gutters believe in it too, and this is how I know they are my family. I believe in making scenes, in jumping in between the beaten and the cruel. I believe in the gates crashing open and the people pouring through to tear down the barricades around City Hall and burn up all the Midtown anti-pedestrian walls while we praise the flames with sweet and wild vigilante verses. We gotta wake up, speak up, never fucking shut up. I'm telling you that poets are supposed to start the fights, to speak the world naked, tear off her stock market clothing, her thin and brutal skin, suck out the clotting war blood and polish those finally exposed bones into something, into something, into something that remembers, into something that remembers how to shine, how to glisten, how to listen, how to gleam, coming clean like a young boy off the diving board, deep water folding open for him in the speechless mouths of the sea. We speak the world naked, speak for the sea. We shout the unspeakable out of the petrified silence. I believe, I believe, I believe that we do. That's what poetry means to me. Hopefully it will come to mean something maybe to those of you who might be listening tonight who haven't been exposed to contemporary poetry or haven't been to poetry readings. I encourage you to join us. I encourage you to write. I encourage you to read. I encourage you to feel. And the next poem is called Beating the Deuce. And I guess anyone who's been to Times Square in New York City will be familiar with what I'm talking about here. Fraudy 2nd Street. 1,000 grinning Mickeys glisten and the bashed down buildings gap like whore teeth. Spotless chartreuse barriers now mother the sight. Post no bills on these walls around the block where dice and the nighttime ladies paint out their lives. Now, rat statues huddle in a cellophane glaze while fields of wet cement stiffen into plazas. Flexing in a t-shirt on the corner, cool, straight, simmering at one edge of his red mouth, teeth yellow as starfish. Dice used to say, baby, I'm gonna make you a star. And the not quite sweet young thing, stepping at his side in silver 6-inch heels, would smile, bless the traffic with a lipstick kiss and a little more swing in her walk. Behind them, neons sizzled and popped, syncopated light from the shops and pit stops populating the deuce. 40 deuce, a jazzed-up ragtime dope-shooting street with some kind of gritty city heart. A dusky heart, a beating, bloody, fearless, human, crazy heart. A stopped heart. The heatless corpse of a street. And the cartoon characters came parading in to banish Dice and all his fish-netted girls from the skee-ball parlors and the small glittering shelter underneath the all-night movie marquee. In the twilight half-life of the old Times Square, somewhere between XXX and Mickey Mouse, those marquees shouted out inscrutable city koans. Go to where people are sleeping, one commanded, and see if they're safe. And nobody out on that street was safe when the deuce surrendered to Disney and the square began dissolving like a wad of cotton candy stuck beneath the tongue. I'd like to close with a couple of very short poems, a couple of haiku. And a haiku is a 17-syllable Japanese format, so it's 5, 7, 5. This one is haiku for Nike. Asian women sweat. Sneakers roll off warehouse lines. We hunt bargain bins. This one is haiku for Harlem, where I live. Late again for school. The boys come out in do-rags, shining nylon heads. And the last one, appropriately entitled, this one's not a haiku, just a shorty, How to Write a Poem. Keep it crisp. Clip the language to its root. Cut lines. Cut stanzas. Cut out your heart. Think up a title. Thank you all for listening. If you've stayed with me this long, I've been reciting poems mostly from this book, The Memory Factory. Appreciate you hanging in there. And I appreciate Jonathan Griffith and talking about, for having me here. I invite you all into the world of poetry. If you like what you've heard, explore further, because I am the very, very tiny tip of what is a very, very big iceberg.